Imagine stepping back to the brutal winter of 1883 in the wilds of Minnesota, where the wind howls like a pack of wolves and the snow piles up so high it buries entire barns overnight. Temperatures plunging to a bone-chilling -35 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of cold that cracks tree trunks with a sound like gunfire and turns your breath into ice crystals before it even leaves your mouth. And in this unforgiving landscape, families huddle in their tiny log cabins, burning through cords of firewood just to stay alive. But one man, a Polish immigrant named Alexi Kowalsski, fresh off the boat with his wife Katarzyna and their young children, decides to do something that shocks everyone around him. He sinks every last penny of his hard-earned savings, $200, which was a fortune back then, enough to buy a team of horses or acres of land, into building what looks like a monstrous, unnecessary brick tower right smack in the middle of his humble cabin. A giant hearth that towers up through the roof, using over 2,400 pounds of heavy red bricks hauled from miles away. And as the neighbors gather around, peering in with raised eyebrows and shaking heads, they couldn't help but laugh and whisper about how this fool is wasting precious resources on a vanity project that blocks the flow of the room, makes furniture placement impossible, and seems like it'll just suck up more wood without giving anything back. But Alexi, with his thick accent and stories from the old country, just smiles quietly, knowing he's drawing on ancient wisdom from Eastern Europe where winters are just as harsh. And he's not building a simple chimney, but a revolutionary thermal mass heater disguised as a central fireplace, one that will capture and store heat in ways these American settlers have never dreamed of. Yet, as the first flakes of snow begin to fall that fateful year, the mockery grows louder, with folks like his neighbor Wilhelm Brandt outright calling it a stone coffin that will bankrupt the family and leave them freezing in the dark. You see, back in those days, most settlers followed the tried and true method of slapping a chimney against the north wall of the cabin to shield it from the biting winds. A straightforward design with a straight flue that shot smoke right out the top. Quick and easy to build with local stones or clay. But inefficient as hell because half the heat escaped through the exterior walls or vanished up into the sky, forcing families to keep fires roaring all day and night, chopping wood endlessly in the freezing cold, and risking chimney fires or carbon monoxide poisoning if they let the flames die down even for a moment. And in Stearns County, where Alexi had staked his claim on a patch of prairie land after fleeing poverty in Poland, the winters were legendary killers, claiming lives every year through frostbite, starvation, or sheer exhaustion from the constant battle against the elements. With records showing 17 people perished that season alone from the cold, entire families found frozen in their beds come spring thaw. So when Alexi insisted on this central placement, winding the flue in a serpentine path through layers of brick like a maze for the smoke, his own wife Katarzyna begged him to stop, tears in her eyes as she worried about feeding the kids if the money ran out. But he pressed on, layering brick upon brick in a design inspired by the traditional Polish peak, a masonry heater that had kept generations warm back home by absorbing the fire's energy into its mass and radiating it slowly over hours, even days. And as the structure rose, dividing the cabin into warmer zones and promising to heat every corner evenly without the drafts that plagued other homes, the community buzzed with doubt, some even betting he'd tear it down by Christmas. But deep down, Alexi knew the science behind the brick's high specific heat capacity meant they could store thousands of BTUs from a short, hot fire and release them gradually, turning a wasteful blaze into a sustained warmth that would let his family sleep soundly through the night without tending the flames. But as the skies darkened and the first real storm brewed on the horizon, whispering threats of the harshest winter on record, would this immigrant's bold invention prove the naysayers wrong, or would it doom his loved ones to a frozen fate that no one could escape? With the foundation laid in the dead center of his one-room cabin, Alexi Kowalsski rolled up his sleeves and got to work, mixing mortar from lime and sand he'd bartered for in town, carefully stacking those hefty bricks one by one in a pattern that seemed overly complicated to the untrained eye, creating not just a straight chute for the smoke but a twisting, turning pathway that forced the hot gases to linger longer, brushing against every inch of the brickwork and transferring their precious heat before finally escaping out the top. And all the while, his neighbors dropped by under the guise of offering help, but really to gawk and gossip. One grizzled farmer named Elias chuckling as he poked at the growing structure and said it looked like a misplaced outhouse, wasting space that could have been used for a bigger bed or storage for tools. And even the local blacksmith, a man respected for his practical know-how, shook his head and warned that centering the chimney would make the whole cabin unstable, prone to leaks or collapse under heavy snow. But Alexi, undeterred, explained in broken English how this design would act like a giant battery for heat, the 4 exposed faces radiating warmth inward to every corner instead of losing it to the outside. World liked those wall-hugging chimneys everyone else built, and he pointed out that in Poland, such heaters were common in peasant homes, where fuel was scarce and winters endless, allowing a single load of wood to keep a room toasty for up to 14 hours without refueling. But his words fell on deaf ears. The settlers to set in their ways to consider foreign ideas, especially from a newcomer who hadn't yet proven himself on the frontier. And as the weeks dragged on, the cost mounted, with Alexi skipping meals to afford more bricks and even trading his only rifle for a wagon load of supplies, leaving his family vulnerable to wildlife but committed to the vision. While Katarzyna paced the dirt floor, her hands wringing as she watched the money vanish into what she called a foolish pile of rocks, fearing they'd have nothing left for seeds come planting season. Yet Alexi pressed forward, incorporating clever touches like air vents at the base to control the draft and ensure clean burning, and by autumn's end, the chimney stood proud, a massive 8-foot wide base tapering up to the roof, capable of holding enough thermal energy around 38,400 BTU when fully charged to maintain a comfortable 55 degrees inside, even as the mercury dipped far below zero outside. And the first test fires proved promising, with a quick 2-hour blaze heating the bricks to 150 degrees, then slowly releasing that warmth like a gentle embrace through the night, allowing the kids to sleep without piling on every blanket they owned. But the ridicule didn't stop. In fact, it intensified at community gatherings like the Harvest Dance, where folks toasted to Alexi's folly and predicted he'd be begging for firewood by January, ignoring how his setup used physics to their advantage. The brick's density storing heat far better than thin stone or metal stoves that cooled off in minutes. And as the first light snow dusted the ground, Alexi stalked just 2 cords of wood, half what his neighbors laid in, confident that efficiency would see them through, while Wilhelm next door boasted of his 8 cords and traditional north wall hearth, ready for whatever nature threw. But little did anyone know that the winter of 1883 to 1884 was shaping up to be a monster, with blizzards that would bury roads for weeks and cold snaps that shattered records, testing every soul on the prairie. And as the Kowalsski family gathered around their giant hearth for the first real chill, warming their hands on the radiating bricks, the question hung in the air like frostwood: this mocked masterpiece hold strong, or crack under the pressure of nature's fury and the weight of doubt. As the winter storms finally unleashed their wrath in late December 1883, blanketing Stearns County in feet of relentless snow and driving winds that screamed through the cracks of every cabin, dropping temperatures to a deadly -35 degrees and holding there for days on end, families across the frontier hunkered down. But for many, it was a losing battle, with chimneys clogging from ice, fires sputtering out in the night, and folks waking to frost-covered walls and numb fingers, leading to tragedies like the 17 souls lost to the cold that season, some frozen while trying to fetch more wood, others succumbing in their sleep as the heat fled their inefficient homes. Yet, in the Kowalski cabin, something miraculous unfolded. Alexi lit a modest fire each morning, burning for just 2 or 3 hours with a fraction of the logs his neighbors deep. The serpentine flue trapping the heat and channeling it into the massive brick core, which absorbed it like a sponge and then radiated it steadily from all sides, keeping the interior above 55 degrees through the darkest hours, allowing his children to play on the floor without shivering and Katarzyna to bake bread without bundling up. And as the blizzards raged, the family slept warm beside the giant hearth all night. The bricks' slow release of stored energy to 4,000 BTS per hour, creating a cocoon of comfort that no exterior chimney could match, proving that Alexi's design wasn't waste, but genius, rooted in the physics of thermal mass, where materials like brick hold on to heat far longer than air or thin walls. And word spread slowly at first, with Wilhelm Brandt trudging over after a particularly brutal night, his own cabin barely above freezing despite constant stoking, to marvel at the warmth and beg for the secret, leading Alexi to share his blueprints and even help rebuild 7 chimneys by spring, influencing the local Polish and German communities to adopt central heaters that became standard by 18, saving countless cords of wood and likely lives in the process. And as the thaw came, revealing the toll of the winter on the land, Alexi's family emerged strong, their invention a testament to immigrant ingenuity, blending old-world knowledge with new-world challenges. A story that echoed through generations until Alexi passed in 1924 at age 80, his chimney standing proud for 73 years before being dismantled in 19... A quiet revolution in frontier living that turned mockery into admiration and waste into warmth. If this tale of resilience and clever engineering hooked you, like it did me, hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden history gems that prove the past is full of surprises, and drop a comment below sharing your own family's winter survival stories. We'd love to hear them, and maybe feature one in a future video.